All right. So they are really important, and where they are used, I cannot tell you that right now. Okay, but yes, they are really important. Fine. So what are constructors and how they are used in Java language? Fine. Let's talk about that. Suppose I make a new class known as hotel. Fine. And just a minute, let me improve the font size. All right. So suppose I make this class in which we have a variable known as the name of the hotel. Okay. And a variable like in capacity of the hotel or number of rooms. All right. And suppose these are the two parameters in the hotel. Okay. Now, if I make a new class, uh, test hotel with the main function, right? In this, if I create the object of the hotel class, right? What I'll do is that I'll write obviously hotel h equals to new hotel, right? Say h1. If I have to initialize the parameters, of course, I'll be writing h1 dot name is say hotel A and h1 dot number of rooms are 100, right? So similarly, if we create one more object, hotel h2 equals to new hotel, and I write h2 dot name is hotel B and h2 dot number of rooms are 200. Fine. So basically, the problem which I'm getting over here is that every hotel I create, say I create S3 as well. Fine. It's okay. I'm able to initialize the objects. All right. But I have to write two lines to do the initialization. What if there were 100 parameters in this class? Or 100, not even 100, just 10. Say name, number of rooms, the address of the hotel, number of staff in the hotel, and different properties of the hotel. Okay, so out here for every object, I would have to write say 10 lines of code to initialize it. All right, so this is a problem. Fine. So what we do, we use constructors over here. We write a constructor of the class like this. Constructor is something which helps you to initialize the object easily. Okay, so what we do, we rewrite the constructor like this. The name of the constructor is same as the name of the class. Same. The name has to be same. And it's not a function. There is no return type. Okay, the name of the function is same. Fine. And this is the known as the default constructor. Suppose if I write over here, default constructor, just this much. And I go to my test total class. If I run this test total, you will see default constructor is called 3 times. Whenever you create the object of the class, automatically the constructor of that class is called. That is why if I'm creating the object three times over here, this default constructor is getting printed three times because the control goes inside the constructor. If I just go and create one more object, okay, so you will see that default constructor is printed four times. So constructor is called whenever you create the object of the class. Okay, now you can also call one more constructor in which you can pass the name and the number of rooms. Okay, so this is a constructor, a different constructor. The name of the constructor is same as the class name, but this constructor is accepting two parameters. One is name of the class and the second parameter is are the number of rooms in the class. Okay, so when we create the object, we can create the object like this. On the fly, we can give the name and the number of rooms. When we are creating the object, we can give the name and number of rooms. The name will go out here in N and number of rooms will go in R. And inside the constructor, you can write name equals to N and room number of. So this name is the global name. Okay, and this number of rooms is the global parameter number of rooms. Right. So you initialize the variables of the class inside the constructor and you can pass the values. Right. So now it becomes easy that in one line I can create the object and I can also pass the parameters of the object. Okay. If you print over here h4 dot name and h4 dot number of rooms, you are going to get hotel 4. Okay, so a constructor, you can create a constructor and you can pass over the parameters to it. Okay, sometimes what people do is that they give the names of these parameters. These are local variables. Okay, the names of these parameters, they become same as names of the global parameters. Okay, so when you write name equals to name, you want that this particular, the global parameter name should be equal to the local parameter name. Okay, this is what you want to do. But if you run this code, it prints null and zero because they are not initialized. Technically, what happens is that the local parameter name gets equated to itself. Okay, and the local parameter number of rooms gets equated to itself. If you want to use the global parameter, then you will have to write this dot name and this dot number of rooms. This actually this represents the global parameter. This represents basically the current object. Okay, the name of the object and the number of rooms. So this points to the global parameters and this points towards the number of rooms. Okay, anybody with any questions? Now this will work. All right, so this is a really important keyword which points towards the current object. and the name of the current object, the number of rooms of the current object, basically the global variables. All right, so that's it about constructor. A constructor is something which will help you to initialize the object very easily. You can pass over the parameters when you create the object rather than passing them in different lines. Okay, right. Now, do you have
Ash,
any questions? Yeah,
can't we do it with global variables as well?
means I could not get you.
Like instead of creating the constructor, same thing can be done by creating the global variables.
Where do you want to create the global variables?
Like in this hotel class, and when we can import this, like inherit that hotel class and test hotel.
Look, this is the global variable already.
Yeah,
This is a global non-static variable.
yeah,
I need to initialize this. How will I initialize this? I can only access these variables through the object of the class, right? Non-static variables can only be accessed with the object. And if they
yeah.
have to be accessed with the object, I have to create the object first. So I created the object and then I accessed them and I initialized them. Without creating the object, I cannot access them. But if I'm doing so, I'll have to initialize them separately in multiple lines. So through constructors, you can do it in one line. You can create the object as well, and you can initialize these variables as well. Are you getting my point?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So variables, these cannot be accessed directly in the class because
yeah.
they are
That,
non-static.
yeah,
So you
that
need,
I know. So for that we need to create an object in the like the same way. So I just wanted to know like the only benefit we get the constructor leaves the memory after running the program. That is it.
yeah, that is up to Java. Okay. In Java, there is something known as garbage collector.
Yeah.
Okay. It automatically runs when you are running the program or after running the program, it clears the memory automatically. So you don't have to worry about the memory. Okay. These days, every PC has a very good RAM and all. So we don't have memory issues these days. Earlier, when like 10 years back, there used to be issues. Now every PC comes with 8 GB, 16 GB RAM, so it's not a problem.
Okay.
Java doesn't occupy more than 500 MB. In extreme situations, I've seen a program
Oh,
like this. Yeah. So, all right. Fine. So this was about constructors. Fine. Now, uh, guys, do you hear some background noise from my side or is it fine?
Yeah, good.
It's good.
It's good. Okay. So this after constructors, what we will be doing is we will be looking at Selenium. Okay, I cannot tell you where constructors are used in Selenium. They'll be used in the framework basically. Okay, but just remember this concept. In the beginning, I'm telling you. Right. Now we need to understand how Selenium works. All right. That day I do not have the code with me. I'll just write the code multiple browsers. That day we had written a code, something like this. That is, we can write driver equals to null. Okay, and we can decide the browser as Firefox. Then the script should be working on Firefox. Okay, I'll have to include the Selenium jar files. Hold on. Okay, I don't know where I've kept them in this PC. Just a minute. Drivers boy September. Okay, they are not there over here in this PC. Uh, Just a minute. Let me go to selenium.dev, downloads. Oh, not this one, sorry. Yeah. So we had written the code like this, and we could write over here that if the browser is equal to 5 Chrome, then you should equate driver to new Chrome driver, right? And then we had written that else if the browser is Firefox, then Firefox driver, right? So this was the file. Just give me 2 minutes, guys. There's some background noise at my place. Just let me put it off. Okay, 2 minutes, guys. This is disturbing me. I'll be back. Okay, so out here, go to the downloads sections. Yeah, it's downloaded. You extract it. So hold on. So I'm keeping the jars over here, right? And you import the jars. Every time you have to do this. Actually, this Eclipse is also with different settings. Okay, so out here you can import these. Now, if you hit Control Shift O, everything will be imported by itself. Right. Now, once you launch Firefox or once you launch Chrome, you have to interact with the website as well. How Selenium works on a web page. Okay, how do you interact with the components of the web page? Right. Suppose if I'm launching Chrome, hold on. What is it saying? Unable to initialize multiple browsers. Okay, okay, I got it. There needs to be some setting done in Eclipse. Hold on. So if I'm launching Chrome and if I'm going to any website, then I need to interact with the components of the website. Okay, now how do I do that? All right, let me inspect this web page. Right, look, what happens is that every web page has some HTML code. When you right click on the web page, you get the option view page source. If you go to the page source of the website, this is actually the HTML code, the response from the server for the website. Okay, so this code actually boils down and forms a page like this. I think almost everybody must be knowing about HTML basic tags and all. There are basically tags and attributes in HTML. Like this is a span tag, it's got an attribute class. This is an I tag, right? With the help of these tags and attributes, the elements on the web page, they are formed. Okay, so what we do is that, just a minute, guys. So what we do is that we analyze the page source of the website and we then find the elements in the page source and Selenium works on this page source. Okay, this page source remains same for all the browsers. Okay, it's not different for every browser. Like even if you go to our website and you inspect the page source, you can right click in Chrome and you will get the inspect option. Fine. You'll get the Chrome inspector window. This is a really good window. Okay. You can go to the dock to bottom view. Right. Over here, the good part is suppose if I have to investigate this login button and if I have to find the page source, there is a small arrow over here. You can click on it and you can move the mouse over the login button and click on the login button. This is the page source for the login button. Okay. The tag name for this button is anchor tag A. And there are different attributes like href attribute is there, class attribute is there. Okay. So a page source compromises of tags and attributes. And we identify the elements with the help of these tags and attributes. Okay. Now, how does the tag and attributes help us and how do we analyze the page source and find different elements? Let us look at that briefly. Okay, I'll make a class over here, or not a class, sorry, an Excel file known as tags and attributes. Okay, now basically HTML comprises of different elements. Every element has got a tag name. What is a tag name? Basically in page source, this li is a tag name. Whatever starts with a conical bracket is a tag name. Fine. A tag is associated with attributes like we have the href attribute over here, class attribute over here. So a tag can have mandatory attributes and some optional attributes. So we are going to study about these now. Right. For example, like what are the components on the web page? If you talk about a web page, you have, say, text fields present on the web page in which you can type something. Then you have buttons. Okay, to click on, you have got radio buttons. You have got checkboxes. You have got links on a web page, images, the regular text. Okay, the normal text which is written on the website. Okay, you have drop downs. Apart from these, there are many other elements as well in the page source which you have to deal with. Okay, or on a web page, but these are the major ones with which we deal, regularly. So every element will have certain tag name, will have certain mandatory attributes and certain optional attributes. If you talk about a text field, fine. If I look at any text field, say if I look at this particular text field, a text field will always have the tag name as input. Input is the tag name for almost all the text fields. Okay, right. For regular buttons on the website, generally the buttons also have the tag name button. You see that? I inspect this login button and this is the button tag. Or at times that sometimes the buttons also have the tag name input. From my experience, like I know that checkboxes and radio buttons also have the tag name input. Okay, but there are some mandatory attributes. Okay, in case of a text field, you will have a type attribute. In case of a text field, most of the times the type attribute is equal to text. Or sometimes if you have an email, it's also equal to email. It's also equal to email. In case of a button, if you look at the button login, the type attribute is there. The type attribute is equal to submit. Yes, this will always be there with the button. In case of radio buttons, the type attribute is there. The value is always radio. In case of checkbox, the type attribute has the value as checkbox. Okay, if you talk about links, links have an attribute as known as anchor A. Right. Whenever you get a link on no matter on which website, always the tag name A will be there. And there will be an attribute known as href, hyperreference, which will point towards the URL when you click on the link. So basically, this URL opens if I click on the link. So the href attribute is always there in case of a link which points towards the URL which opens when you click on the link. If you talk about an image, the tag name is always img. Okay, if you say look at this Wisdom Trainings logo image, sorry, this img will always be there, and there will always be a source attribute src, which will have the URL from which the image is actually loading onto this website. Like this URL, if I open a new tab, so this is the image. Okay, so you have the img tag, which will always have the source attribute src in case of an image which will hold the location from which the image is being loaded. And the regular text. Regular text can have different tag names. Sometimes it comes under div, sometimes a span tag, sometimes para tag. Okay, sometimes h1, h2 headings. So you cannot define, you have to always investigate. There is no fixed tag name for a regular text and there is no mandatory attribute. Okay, for a drop down, right, if you look at this contact us page, if you look at this country drop down, for example, a drop down will always have the tag name select. Inside the select tag, there are different option tags. Each option tag represents the option in the drop down. You see, the first one is please select country, then Afghanistan, and it starts like this. Right. So you have the option select tag for a drop down. It will always have a tag name known as select. Out here there are few attributes, but there is no mandatory attribute for a drop down. Okay, there are no mandatory attributes defined. So if these are the elements, then these will be the tag names and these will be the attributes which will always be there. Okay, but there will be some optional attributes and these are important. Majorly the optional attributes help us to identify the elements. And these optional attributes are 99.99% of the times there are three attributes: ID, name, or class. These can or cannot be there with the element. But if ID or name, okay, ID or name, these are unique. Generally, the developers they don't give different IDs to different elements on the web page. If an element has got ID or name, it really becomes easy to identify the element with Selenium. Okay, for example, if you talk about this, I just selected this drop down, country drop down. It's got both the parameters. It's got the name as well, and it's got the ID as well. So if I have to write a script in which I have to interact with this component, it will really be easy for me. Okay, I can directly identify it with ID. All right, but you don't get IDs every time. Okay, for example, if I have to read this Indian phone number over here, if I go and select this, then this is the para tag which has got no ID. So it's not necessary that you'll get ID or name every time, but if you get the ID or name of the element, it it of course will be unique and it will be really easy to identify the element. Okay, if you look at this email text field, it's got a name. It's also got an ID, so it'll be easy to identify it. All right. Sometimes you have a class attribute. The class attribute is not unique. Don't think that this is unique. This is not unique, although it helps you to identify the element, but multiple elements on the same page can have the same class attribute. Like this is the input field whose class is form control. If I look at the contact number text field, it's also got the same class. If I look at the name text field, it's also got the same class. Look, generally elements which have the same look and feel, okay, they have the same class. This is actually the CSS class. If you know about CSS, it's responsible for the look and feel of the element. So generally the elements which have the same look and feel, they have the same class. For example, if I go to the very simple website like in.rediff.com and if I go to the shopping section, you will see that these are buy now buttons. The look and feel of these buy now buttons is same. If I look at the first buy now button, this is a span with the class product buy now. If I look at the second buy now button, it's also a span with the class product buy now. So the elements over here, these buttons, they have the same look and feel. They have the same class. So class is not unique. Okay, if in Selenium there are locators to or there are mechanisms to identify the element. You can identify the element with its class name, with its ID, with its name. Okay, so when you are doing that, you have to be careful that fine, if I get an ID or a name with an element, I can identify it. But if you get a class, then you have to be a little careful. Okay, If you go to the Selenium website, all right, you go to Selenium Dev and you go to the documentation, or hold on, not this documentation, the API documentation. And if you scroll down, you will have a class, a simple class known as by class. This by class holds the mechanisms used to locate an element within a document. Okay, uh, document means the web page basically. So this class holds the mechanisms through which we identify the elements on the web page. Okay, and there are different mechanisms like you can identify it with ID. You can identify a link with a link text in Selenium. How will we use this? I'll tell you, but just I'm telling you theoretically right now that how you actually do it. Okay, or you can identify the element with the name. Where will the name come from? You will have to go and investigate the element, and if the element has got a name, then you can use the name attribute. Okay, or you can identify the element with the partial link text or even a tag name. Although multiple elements, like we saw that all the links on the web page have the tag name A, so it becomes a little tricky to use this thing. If nothing works, then we have got two locator strategies. One is using CSS selector, or the other one is using XPath. We'll also study about these. We'll start with the simpler ones, that how you can identify the element with link text ID, link text name, partial link text. Okay, and then we'll jump over to how to identify the elements with XPath and CSS selectors. Okay, so first we'll look at the easier ones, and then we'll look at how to code with the easier ones, and then we look at the complex ones. Okay, because not every time you will have an element with ID or a name. If you're having an element on the web page which is not having ID or name, then you will have to use XPath or you'll have to use CSS selectors. Okay, so that's the thing. Right, so this is the tags and attributes matrix. It's really nice, and it's not, you should not be knowing it by heart. Don't mug it up. Okay, just understand that there are elements, there are tags, and there are attributes, and there are optional attributes. Okay, now, guys, I cannot take the full class today. Right, I have to go to a dentist. I've hurt my tooth yesterday, so I have to be there at around 8:15 in the morning before the office. So I'll have to stop here for today. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll tell you how to write the code tomorrow. Fine. And there is some